WQAD News 8, this is WQAD This Week.
Good morning, it's August 21st, and thank you for joining us for News 8 This Week. I'm John Diaz. Right now, Afghan refugees in Iowa are working against the clock to get needed paperwork finished before the one-year deadline of their arrival to the U.S. Mary Sugden spoke with lawyers helping families navigate this process and explains what they're up against.
This is a time of a lot of stress in the Afghan community right now.
For Afghan evacuees, there's 3 types of status they can apply for: a special immigrant visa, temporary protected status, or asylum.
Many Afghans will be applying for asylum, which is a path to permanent legal status in the United States and permanent protection.
Ann Nafier and Allison McCarthy are 2 of the experts helping Afghan families navigate these lengthy documents.
We've screened about 170 families, and right now we have less than 15 pro bono attorneys, perhaps, who have stepped forward being willing to take on an asylum case. So clearly we have many families who right now do not have any representation.
And with that heavy caseload, the clock is ticking down to the required deadline.
We can tell that the Afghan community is getting very concerned about this because for many of them, their 1 year is coming up August 25th or maybe even sooner for some of them.
The Women at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has issued a policy statement saying if someone arrived to the U.S. on parole, they'd get an extension. All Afghan people airlifted out of Kabul were granted parole.
However, it's not a sort of totally clear exception, and there's still some case-by-case evaluation that has to be done in each person's circumstances.
And if they don't meet the required deadline, it's their legal status at risk.
So we're really talking about our allies possibly becoming undocumented immigrants in the United States. And I just cannot believe that Americans or our elected officials want that to happen.
And joining us now is Mary Sugden, Chief Political Reporter with our sister station WOI in Des Moines. Mary, good morning.
Morning, John.
All right, your story did a great job of breaking down what seems to be an incredibly complicated process. There's a sense of urgency here. Did the attorneys you spoke with give you a sense of how the families are feeling?
Absolutely, John. What the advocates told me is really these families right now are feeling the stress, and that really comes down to them coming up on 1 year of being here in the United States. And with that, that's a very important deadline for some documentation. So they need to file that within the year, and that's really to maintain their legal status here. It's not only does that, maintain the benefits for them and for their family, but many of them still have family members in Afghanistan that they need their legal status here to be able to help them get out from Afghanistan, in the coming, hopefully, months here or in the coming years. What we did learn from lawyers is that most all of the Afghan evacuees who are here in the United States came under something called a parole status. Now, with that parole status, the agency who oversees this document has basically said that that could come with an extension. But what lawyers told me is that that's really not a cut and dry thing. It's kind of a case-by-case basis here. And so a lot of these families, they want to make it by that 1 year deadline, which for some families coming up as quick as this week. So there's really a big push here to get that documentation done within that deadline.
And you sort of alluded to this for various reasons. These refugees are trying to build a new life for themselves, but they are facing some other compounding challenges. Part of that has to do with the language barrier and really a lack of translation services. Is that right?
That's right. On top of a lack of legal representation, there's really a lack of interpreters. And one clear example of this can kind of be seen when we look at, school districts. It's back to school season right now. And for families registering, most of this is done online. And a lot of that registration is offered in either English or in Spanish. And one of the groups I spoke with here in the Des Moines area, they worked with families for 1 weekend. They brought in an interpreter, and they were there for about 4 hours straight, just trying to get these families registered to make sure that they could, have a schedule, sign up for the bus, very important things. But, it's just, they know that there's more families who need this. Des Moines here, our district has hired a Pashto and a Dari interpreter, but they likely won't start, according to officials that I spoke to, until early September, which would be, of course, a few weeks after classes start. So again, that's just making one more compounding factor for these families to really kind of feel acclimated here.
And something that a lot of folks may not even think about, but transportation options are limited. How is that making things more difficult for the folks who are here?
Absolutely right. You know, what I heard from the advocates is a lot of these families don't have access to a vehicle. And so they're really struggling to get to basic things like, the grocery store, to a job interview, or to their doctor's appointments. And, even one family that we talked to, they had talked about a volunteer stepping forward to drive their son to Iowa City for a eye appointment, an eye surgery, actually, that their child needed. And even for families that are able to get their hands on a vehicle, then you have to think about, okay, they need a driver's license, they need insurance. And again, it comes back to that language barrier and some difficulties, and really getting all that paperwork filed. And so some of these groups are hoping people step forward to help with, behind the wheel classes, or to get people to the DMV to get some of these things, completed. But again, it's really difficult to feel like a citizen here if you are not able to get to those, basic needs that you have.
Yeah, and let's talk about medical care as well. What are the challenges you're hearing about getting access to everything from basic care to some of the specialized treatment that you just referenced?
Yeah, one of the clearest examples of this that advocates are really, speaking out about is when we look at dental care. So here in the metro, they say there's not a whole lot of dentists who accept Medicaid, which is what these families, are using and need. And they really kind of focus this concern onto children. They're saying that the kids that are coming over here, they have some really, intense dental needs. There's no fluoride in Afghanistan. There's no, they haven't gotten dental care before. So we're talking serious to the point of, needing their teeth pulled or really needing, surgery. So again, we've seen, some agencies step forward. I know iSmile with the state has, helped a little bit, and there's been, different doctors' offices that have stepped forward to put on, a weekend clinic, and they get families through. But again, that's great for that one time, but they're looking for that more, systemic fix so that these families, don't have to struggle so much trying to find, something as basic as dental care.
And what are some of the proposed solutions to all of this that you've just described, all of the backlog that we've talked about?
One of the best ones that advocates are really excited about is something called the Afghan Adjustment Act. Now, it was proposed into Congress back in May. It was bipartisan. And what supporters, describe it as is really something that kind of makes a more seamless path for these families to get that full citizenship. Supporters here, especially the lawyers that I spoke to that are working on those documents, they say it helps with the deadlines, it helps give them more resources, more funding, and really just makes this so that it's not so complicated for these families to figure out. And with that, they say, it's not just for these Afghan evacuees. We might have Ukrainian refugees that are either here or are, soon to be coming, as well as anyone else that fits into some of this, asylum area, that this would be an act that just would be a blanket help for all of those families to navigate this that much easier.
All right, Mary Sugden, a lot of great insight here. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
And some 400 migrants from Afghanistan have arrived in the Quad Cities over the past year, and there could still be more that eventually make their way here. That's according to the organization World Relief Quad Cities. Now, the organization is also getting help from Illinois law firms to better serve Afghans applying for asylum. Meanwhile, another challenge they face is the cost of the application process. For example, blood work alone is $300 per person, and the nearest office where that can happen is in Cedar Rapids.